Hey, it's Will from Your Career Mastery, and today we're going to be talking about how to answer the job interview question, tell me about yourself. So it's got to be one of the most commonly asked job interview questions, which is great because it means that you can come into the job interview with the confidence knowing that you've prepared to answer this question, and it's going to help really build that initial rapport and give you some confidence that then you can ride that momentum throughout the rest of the job interview. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to answer this question. I've got a bit of a framework and some sort of do's and don'ts that will help you really mentally prepare for going into the job interview, and just some thought starters for how to answer this question. So I've broken it into two parts. First part is sort of the unspoken goals of answering this question, and the goals that the interviewer is trying to achieve and things they're trying to really understand by answering or asking this question. The second part is do's and don'ts. So these are things for you to consider when you're answering this question, and as well when you're mentally preparing what you're going to say and what kind of 2 to 3 talking points you think are going to be most relevant for you based on the job interview that you're going for. So starting with these unspoken goals. So essentially the first one is when the interviewer is asking you, tell me about yourself, they're really just trying to get a bit more context on who you are and your career path. So at this stage, they've seen your resume, you're sort of a two-dimensional, person, you're a piece of paper, but they want to learn more about you and who you are, and also just get some more context on your career path and essentially what has landed them before you in the context of why you are going for this job today. So not only do they want to know a bit more about who you are, but they just want to get some context on your career path and maybe how each job is fed into the next, that then provides a bit of context, a bit of background of why you're interviewing for this role today, but also why you're a valuable candidate for the role. So they want to know more context in your career path, why you're interviewing for this job, and again, telling the story of your career in the interview will help provide, like I said, a bit of context on why you're going for this job. But they're not explicitly asking that when they say, tell me about yourself, but it will come out through your answer. So it's things that they're looking for. I mean, like all behavioral-based questions too, they're looking to understand about your communication skills. So they're asking you a very open-ended question, tell me about yourself. They want to see, how long do you talk for? How do you compose yourself? How do you think about yourself? How do you view your career? These are all things that will come out in your communication of how you respond to this question. And we're going to talk some more about the do's and don'ts for answering this question a bit later in the video. And that will again reflect a lot about your communication skills, but it'll also reflect a lot about how you think and how you present yourself. So, your resume could be enough for some jobs. If you looked at your skills and experience alone, on paper, this person looks fantastic. Have you ever heard the saying, oh, that couple, they were great on paper, but in real life, they didn't work out? Well, this is why they want to vet you in person. It's one thing to look at a resume. It's another thing to do a Zoom call or a face-to-face meeting with another human being, get a feel for who they are and their eye contact, their body language, how they breathe, how they speak, the clarity and the linearness, to use not a real word, of their dialogue and how they communicate. So these are all things that they're unspoken goals, I would say, in terms of when they ask this question, what they're looking for. So how you communicate, how you think of yourself, how you present yourself, what's your attitude, and what are your values, and what's your energy? Are you going into the interview really positive? Because again, it's going to be one of the first questions they ask. So how you communicate this response really sets a base for the whole interview. So it's really important that you're prepared for this question. You bring a good attitude, and you bring a really good positive sense of self to how you answer the question. So that brings us to some more tangible do's and don'ts. So for the most part, this is such an open-ended question that you could talk for 2 hours if someone asks you, tell me about yourself, or you could talk for 2 minutes. And that says a lot about you, right? You're in a job interview, might be half an hour, 20 minutes, might be an hour. Either way, they've got a lot of ground that they need to cover in terms of questions they need to ask you. So it's really important that you speak clearly, simply, succinctly, as in not talking too much, and also in a linear fashion, right? So they're going to ask you, tell me about yourself. The most important thing here is that you talk about your career path. So tell me about yourself. That is your last 2 to 3 jobs, and I've got that captured here. We'll jump over to that point actually. So they say, tell me about yourself. What they're really asking when they ask this question, because you are in a job interview, they want to know about your career path Most importantly, your last 2 to 3 jobs. So when I say your career, if you're like 45, 35, you don't need to give your whole job history all the way back to that paper route you had when you were 12 years old. Not relevant in most cases for the job you're going for at that age. So the last 2 to 3 jobs, that's what you want to focus on, because that's going to be the most relevant skills and sets of experience that will feed your value for this, your ability to get the job that you're going for. So you want to talk about your last 2 to 3 jobs, which is great, because that, even just that, forces you to be succinct and to be linear. If you start with the last job you had, then maybe work backwards from that. But you want to be, brevity is key here. You don't want to give 10 minutes of detail breaking down every single thing you did in your last role, but you do want to give a brief overview of your role at that past job and also your responsibilities. So let's say you've got, someone says, tell me about yourself. You maybe want to give it 2 to 3 minutes max, giving a very high level overview of your last 2 to 3 roles and the roles, like what information about that role and what your responsibilities were. This isn't necessarily the time to break down into detail about all your achievements or all the challenges you faced or any of that stuff. That will come up probably later in the interview, and there may be a subsequent behavioral based question where they do ask you what were some of your achievements in your last role, what were the things that you were proudest about that you achieved in your previous role. So there'll be a space to talk about all those things in detail and bring to life some of the examples in your resume that are really good talking points. But in the tell me about yourself question, they just want a real brief overview of your last 2 to 3 roles and what you've done there, which again provides context for why you're going for this job and why you're a good prospective candidate for that role. So keep it clear, keep it simple, be succinct and also follow a linear trajectory. Don't just bounce around from role to role. Have a flow to it, have a pattern, have it make sense in the way that you tell the story about your career. Last 2 to 3 roles, super important. Overview of your role and your responsibilities. So let's talk about what not to do. So when someone asks you in a job interview, tell me about yourself, you don't spend 5 to 10 minutes talking about, that hike you did in the Scottish Highlands, that awesome trip you did to the Greek islands, or your pets, or what you're watching on Netflix. It's okay to sprinkle, things that you're interested in this section, but it shouldn't be the meat of your answer, by no means. It should be at least 90% talking about your previous roles and telling them about yourself from a professional standpoint. Because again, you're in a job interview, not a date. Save the talk about Netflix and TV shows and your dog and your traveling experience for the dates, not your job interview. So don't just talk about yourself. There's a place for it, but if you're going to do it minimally. Do not complain about your past roles. So as you're telling the story about your last 2 to 3 jobs and why you're really excited to be interviewing for this role, don't say, I can't wait to interview for this job because my current role really sucks and my boss is so mean and the workplace is toxic and I work crazy hours and I just can't get anything done. I don't feel productive. That's not, there's a professional way to address the challenges in your current role and maybe why they're not a good lifestyle fit, and that's why you're interviewing for this role. But it shouldn't be a massive complaint fest when you say, talk about your previous roles, because it doesn't reflect well on your attitude and your values, and it's just unprofessional. And again, like I said before about sucking the energy out of the room, you want it to be positive. You want it to be a really positive experience, and you want them to walk away, because again, the person that's interviewing you, they're giving time out of their day to chat to you. So you have to be really respectful of that, because they're going to finish the interview and go away into their day. You want to leave a real positive feeling or a positive association with them about you. And complaining about your past roles and just talking about, what TV shows you're watching, although that might be fun, it's not really relevant. It's not going to help you really land the role. And ace the interview. So there's that, but also talking for too long. So that's why I really wanted to drive home the key point up here about keeping it clear, keeping it simple, and focusing on your last 2 to 3 roles. You've got a whole job interview to talk about so many things, and you also want to leave space for you to ask questions in the job interview. You don't want to just go all out on the tell me about yourself question. Talk succinctly and simply and with clarity, and be linear and keep it short, keep it sweet. That way you give them just enough information that they can start asking questions. You might give an overview of your last role and the role before that. That might open up questions that they already have planned to ask you about those roles and what you did there and who you worked with and the great achievements that you had there. So you want to leave space for that. There's a lot of questions that you need to ask and that they need to ask in this job interview. You can't just spend the whole time talking about yourself, because that's not going to have a positive outcome for your chances of getting the role. So that's why it's so important, again, you want to go into the interview with maybe 2 to 3 talking points around each of your last roles. So let's say, I can use an example from my personal life. So I started a new role, May last year. So I've been in the role almost a year now. I work for a multinational FMCG company based here in Melbourne, Australia. Although they're global, but I work in the Melbourne office. And I had 4 years of experience in my previous role in an insurance technology company. And before that, I had about 16 months experience working for a digital marketing agency based here in Melbourne. And before that, it was a whole mix of warehouse management, but also I worked on the website for this distribution company, freelance writing. And before that, I was at university studying and I was doing catering. So automatically, catering when I was at university, that work, not relevant. The warehouse management, even though I did some work on their website, not relevant. Last 2 to 3 jobs. Not to mention my last job, I was there for 4 years. So I got plenty of stuff to talk about. So in that interview, when my manager asked me, or he's now my manager, but he was then just my, hiring manager. He said, tell me about yourself. And I said, yes, I'm working for this insurance technology company here in Melbourne, Australia. I work as a content manager currently, but I started about 4 years ago as a content specialist. I started off writing content articles and blogs, but I currently look after the entire content and SEO strategy, which includes video production, agency management, blog editing and writing, working really closely with our legal and compliance teams to make sure all of our content meets our legal obligations, but also editing all of our content to make sure that it's proofread and it's user-friendly. I also collaborate with our design and UX teams on changes to our website experience to drive improved traffic conversion, but also I work really closely with our digital marketing team across all parts of search engine optimization. So I've been there 4 years and had a really great trajectory there, and also produced a lot of great work in the content space. Before that, I worked for a very small agency based here in Melbourne, Australia. It's about 6 of us in the team, ops manager, videographer, content writer, which is myself, and a graphic designer. I was there for 16 months, worked on a variety of clients' websites, producing content, but also wrote email campaigns, Facebook ads, social media management, etc. So that's why I'm really excited to interview for this role today. Sounds like a very exciting new opportunity. In my current role, I'm kind of looking for a new challenge. I've been there 4 years and I've learned enough about insurance for one lifetime. I'm really excited for a new challenge with a different market, different products, but also bringing the knowledge that I've got to a new industry. So that's sort of how I'd answer the question. I'm not exactly sure how long that was, but try to keep it simple, succinct, give a good overview of what you've done, provide just enough detail that there are things there to cherry pick out. The interviewer might say, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's chat more about that because it's relevant for the role and a good learning for you going into the interview. Again, 2 to 3 jobs. If you've been in your last 2 to 3 jobs long enough, like I was in my last role 4 years, to be honest, I could have talked about just that for 3-4 minutes because I was there for 4 years. I did quite a lot. But at the end, showing that the job before that, even though I was only there for 16 months, and it was back in 2016, and I interviewed for this role, what was it now, last year, 2022, there's still a lot of relevant context about my career path, how I started as a content writer, moved into a bigger company as a content writer, and I ended up a content strategist, content manager. So it showed a trajectory that was linear, but also told the story of my career and also my goals as someone who works in digital marketing. So that's sort of it for this video. Again, understand that they're not just asking, tell me about yourself. They want to learn about how you communicate and your attitude and your values and why you're excited about going for this role, and also telling the story about your career. So when they ask you, tell me about yourself, don't just focus on personal stuff. Do that last, and again, very, very briefly, if you feel like it's appropriate. Read the room. If you feel like it's appropriate and you've got good rapport, throw it in as a nice personal side note, but it's not a mandatory by any means. Tell a story about your career, last 2 to 3 jobs. There should be plenty of meat in that to focus on and really cherry pick the most important things that really show the narrative of your career. But keep it short, keep it sweet. 2 to 3 dot points if you're going to jot it on paper the week before the interview to get mentally prepared. 2 to 3 points per last 1 to 2 roles, so 6 points in total. And just have those points there to hang your hat on as you're answering the question, but don't overwhelm yourself. When it comes to, some people online talk about having a script rehearsed for how to answer this question. Don't have a script rehearsed. You're not an actor. You're going in there to have a genuine conversation with someone, have some talking points, but it should feel natural. It should flow effortlessly. Things might come to you in the moment as you're answering the question that you didn't think about when you were mentally preparing the day or the week before. That's fine. Let it out. Just as long as you can hit those most important points and really land a clear message about who you are and why you're excited about this role, that is the most important thing to focus on when it comes to answering this question. And really just having a good dialogue with the person you're talking to. So much about it is just your attitude. Don't get me wrong, you've got to be qualified for the role you're going for, but they're looking to see if you're a cultural fit and how you answer these questions, how you communicate, how you present yourself, showing that you've got a good attitude and you like working with people and you're really excited to get things done. You don't complain about your past roles. No, you take responsibility. You might acknowledge there are things in your current role that you don't like. That's fine. It's fair to assume that if someone is moving jobs, there's probably parts of their current role that they're a bit sick of, that they're looking to get away from. It's almost implied by the fact that you're moving jobs, so you don't need to call it out, and you don't need to definitely not spend 5 minutes just complaining. Not good for anyone, not good for you, not good for the interviewer, and not good for your prospects about getting this role. And don't talk for too long. So keep it short, keep it sweet, stay to the point. And if they want to ask more questions throughout or at the end, then you can provide opportunity for that. But given that this is the question, it's opening up the interview, you don't want to psych yourself out too early. Keep it simple. That's my best piece of advice. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you've got any questions, please chuck them in the comments below. I'll get back to you ASAP. More videos coming out every single week to help you land your dream job and move forward in your career. So make sure you hit subscribe and like the video if you found it helpful. I was Vaughan from Your Career Mastery, and I look forward to chatting to you soon. Cheers.